The kingdom of Valdinia lay nestled between bluish mountains and valleys full of life. It was a land surrounded by dense forests, crystal-clear rivers, and a breeze that always seemed to carry stories on its wings. Ruled by the royal Almavari family, the kingdom lived through a period of stability, sustained by a rigid caste system that determined every person's destiny from birth. In a village far from the royal center lived Elara Varnet, a young woman who drew attention wherever she went. Her long, fiery red hair, as intense as the sunset, flowed down her waist in soft waves. Her eyes were a light, piercing green, like a clear sky after the rain. Her skin was pale, dusted with delicate freckles across her cheeks and nose, details that gave her a unique and unforgettable beauty. Elara belonged to the sixth caste, composed of artists and craftsmen. Her family worked hard to make a living. Her father was a wood sculptor, her mother sewed clothes for wealthier families, and her two younger brothers helped however they could. Life was simple and sometimes difficult, but surrounded by affection and unity. Despite her modest routine, Elara had always dreamed of more. She longed for freedom, the chance to choose her own path, something rare for someone of her position. And deep in her heart, she had already made one choice: Cale Drummond. Cale was a boy from the seventh caste, the son of bakers. He had dark, slightly messy hair and warm brown eyes that seemed to smile even when he was serious. Tall, broad-shouldered, and full of spontaneous energy, he was the kind of person everyone liked instantly. Elara and Cale had been meeting in secret for almost a year, in hidden clearings away from the village, where they shared promises, laughter, and dreams that felt possible only when they were together.
That afternoon, under an orange sky and the soft warmth of late day, Elara walked along the hidden path that led to their meeting place. Cale was already there, sitting on a moss-covered rock, tapping his foot impatiently. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile. "I thought you weren't coming," he said, pretending to be offended. "I would never miss it," Elara replied with a smile. He stepped closer, holding her hands gently. "You're more beautiful every day, you know that?" She laughed, shaking her head. "And you still know exactly what to say." They sat side by side, watching the sky shift in color. For a few moments, it felt as if the world had stopped, and there were only the two of them. Then, a distant sound broke the peace. Bells, coming from the central square. "Did you hear that?" Cale lifted his head. "Yes. It's the sound of the royal messengers," Elara said, a shiver running down her spine. Soon after, a rider dressed in blue and gold, the royal colors, crossed the square on a white horse. He carried a sealed scroll. The entire village quickly gathered to hear the announcement. Elara and Cale blended into the crowd. The messenger opened the scroll and read aloud. "By order of His Majesty King Aurelio Almavari and His Highness Prince Darian Almavari, it is hereby announced the commencement of the royal selection of Valdinia. 23 young ladies from all castes shall be chosen to live in the Palace of Lumen and compete for the heart of the Crown Prince. The Crown invites all families to register their eligible daughters. The future of the kingdom shall not only be determined by royal blood, but also by the character, courage, and virtues of the chosen candidates." A murmur spread instantly through the crowd. Some girls sighed dreamily, others whispered with excitement. Mothers and fathers exchanged expectant looks. Elara stood still, heart pounding, as if she had just heard a prophecy she wished she could ignore. Cale turned to her, his face serious. "Tell me you're not thinking about—" "No," she said quickly, though her voice trembled. Elara's mother appeared moments later, eyes bright with excitement. "Elara, this is your chance! Do you have any idea what this means for our family?" "Mother, you're beautiful, well-mannered, talented. They'll love you. This could change everything." Elara looked at Kael, seeking support. But he was pale, as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "Say something," she whispered. He pressed his lips together, holding back his pain. I can't compete with a prince, Elara." Those words echoed inside her like thunder. Later that night, alone in her room, she heard her parents talking excitedly about the registration forms and the possibility of the family's ascension. Elara remained silent, staring at the ceiling, her heart torn in two. On one side, Kael's love, simple and true. On the other, a completely different life, full of promises and uncertainty. As the stars glittered above Valdenia that night, Elara had the haunting feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. The days following the announcement were filled with unusual excitement throughout the village. Families spoke about the selection on every corner, in bakeries, at the markets, even in the workshops. Young women of the right age daydreamed about luxurious gowns, royal gardens, and enchanted balls. Mothers sewed new dresses and practiced refined manners, as if they were about to host the royal family in their own homes. At the Varnet residence, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Elara's mother could not hide her excitement. "You must apply, Elara. We can't let this opportunity slip away," she repeated day after day, adjusting her daughter's clothes with great care. Elara tried to remain calm. "Mother, there are 23 spots for the entire kingdom. Do you know how many girls will apply? That's exactly why we need to try. If it's meant to be, it will be," her mother replied firmly. Her father, quieter, watched from a distance. He knew how divided his daughter's heart was. When they were alone, he placed a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "No one will force you to do anything, but if you decide to try, do it for your dreams, not for ours." Elara nodded, grateful for his words. On the morning of the registration, she wore a simple blue dress, one of the few still in good condition, and tied her red hair into a delicate braid. Her mother placed a lace shawl over her shoulders, and before they left, looked at her as if she could already see her standing among nobles. "You were born for something greater, Elara. I can feel it." At the local administration building, a long line of girls waited, some giggling nervously, others with a determined expression. Elara filled out the form with trembling hands. Name, age, caste, talents, brief description. Each line she wrote seemed to pull her closer to a destiny she wasn't sure she wanted. That same afternoon, she met Kael in the forest, as they always did. But this time, there was a different tension between them. "So you're really going to apply?" he asked bluntly. I didn't want to, but I feel that if I don't try, I'll spend my life wondering what if." Kael ran a hand through his hair, restless. "You know what it means if you're chosen, don't you? You'll live in the palace, you'll meet the prince, and—" He hesitated. "You might fall in love with him." Her chest tightened. "Kael, you're my choice. You've always been that." "Then don't go," he pleaded. "Stay with me." Elara fell silent. For the first time, she had no answer. 2 weeks passed. Life in the village seemed to go on as usual, though everyone kept an eye out for the royal messengers, who at any moment could bring the list of the chosen ones. Elara tried to act naturally, helping her father in the workshop and sewing with her mother, but her heart raced every time she heard the sound of hooves on the road. One bright morning, A rider carrying the blue and gold royal banner appeared in the square, drawing a crowd. Elara and her brothers ran to see. The messenger unrolled a parchment and began to read the names aloud. With each name, shouts and tears filled the air. Some families jumped with joy, others embraced in consolation. By the time he reached the middle of the list, Elara was already convinced she would not be called. But then the messenger raised his voice. "Elara Varnet, from the province of Seyan, 6th caste." For a moment, everything went silent. She blinked, unable to believe it. "It's you!" her mother cried, grabbing her hands. "I knew it!" Her brothers began jumping around her, and the neighbors applauded. Yet Elara felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. The following days were a whirlwind. Representatives from the court visited their home for interviews and verifications. Seamstresses arrived with elegant dresses tailored to her measurements. A royal guard delivered a sealed letter bearing the crest of Valdania. "Dear Miss Elara Varnet, it is with great pleasure that we inform you of your selection to join the group of 23 young women who will participate in the royal selection. Your presence is expected at the Palace of Lumen on the 17th of next month. May the grace of the kingdom be with you." She reread the letter so many times that she knew every word by heart. And still, the reality felt distant, almost like a dream she hadn't fully stepped into.
On the eve of her departure, Elara asked to see Kale one last time. They went to the clearing where everything had begun. The moon bathed the scene in a soft, almost melancholic light. Kale stood silently, his brown eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I knew this could happen, but it hurts so much more than I imagined," he said quietly. Elara took his hand. "I don't want to lose you." "Then promise you'll come back, that you won't forget me," he whispered. She swallowed hard. "I promise." He stepped closer and kissed her with a passion that felt like he was trying to preserve that moment forever. When they finally pulled apart, Kale rested his forehead against hers. "You're going to shine in there, but if the prince can't see who you truly are, I'll be here." Elara left with tears in her eyes and her heart torn between love and the unknown. The next day, the entire village gathered along the main road to watch the departure of the selected girls from the region. Elara wore an elegant dress that highlighted her fiery red hair and bright eyes. She stepped into the royal carriage with the feeling that she was leaving behind not just her home, but a part of herself. As the carriage rolled away, she looked out the window and saw Kael standing in the distance. He didn't wave. He just stood there, watching, and that alone was enough to make her heart ache even more. The Palace of Lumen awaited her, and with it a destiny she could never have imagined. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon when Elara's carriage passed through the main gates of the Palace of Lumen. The white stone road shimmered as though each fragment had been carefully polished for this very day. Tall trees lined the path, swaying gently in the wind, as if bowing in silent greeting to the new arrivals. Seated by the window, Elara watched everything with wide, awed eyes. Her heart beat in an uneven rhythm, as if trying to keep pace with the speed at which her world was changing. The sky-blue gown she had been given the night before looked even more radiant in the morning light. Her red hair, loose in soft waves, caught streaks of gold as the sun filtered through the window. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the blend of anxiety and wonder flooding her chest. Beside her sat two of the other selected, Mirella, a young woman with warm brown skin and striking green eyes, and Alina,
whose sleek black hair and upright posture gave her an air of quiet calculation. Mirella fidgeted, tapping her fingers on her knees, while Alina remained silent, her sharp gaze taking in every detail as though she were already assessing her competition. "Can you believe we're really here?" Mirella whispered, leaning closer to Elara, her eyes bright with excitement. "It still feels like a dream that could change everything." The sound of carriage wheels gave way to the distant echo of royal trumpets announcing the arrival of the selected. The great gates swung open, revealing the majestic palace gardens. Beds of roses in vivid colors decorated the perfectly symmetrical grounds. Fountains spilled crystal-clear water into marble basins, and statues of the kingdom's heroes stood guard in solemn silence. When the carriages finally stopped before the grand staircase, uniformed guards stepped forward to open the doors. Elara descended carefully, feeling the cool marble beneath her delicate shoes. Her gaze lifted to the palace facade. Tall towers stretched toward the sky, stained glass windows told stories of ancient days, and flags bearing Lumen's emblem, a golden sun over a white field, waved proudly in the morning breeze. "Ladies, welcome to the Palace of Lumen," announced a butler with a deep, refined voice. "You will soon be escorted to the grand hall for the welcoming ceremony." The 23 girls were gathered into neat lines. There was an evident mix among them. Some carried themselves with poise and restraint, while others exuded theatrical confidence. Whispers rippled through the group like a restrained tide. Comments about the gardens, the sheer size of the palace, and most of all, about Prince Darian. A shiver ran down Elara's spine at the sound of his name murmured among the girls. Darian, the prince she would soon meet. She tried not to think of Kale, the boy she had left behind, his smile, his touch, their late-night talks beneath the stars. His face lingered in her mind, a bittersweet memory that clashed with the grandeur before her. She drew a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. The choice had been made. Now she had to live this new chapter. The group was led inside through vast corridors where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls of light. Embroidered tapestries adorned the walls, depicting victories and alliances from ages past. The air carried the faint scent of fresh flowers and subtle spices, a fragrance that whispered of both power and tradition. At last, they reached the grand hall. The space was immense, with a gleaming white marble floor that reflected the sunlight streaming through tall windows. At the far end of the room stood an elevated platform. Upon it, the royal family waited with grace and dignity. And at the center stood him, Prince Darian.
Elara held her breath the moment she saw him for the first time. Tall, with impeccably straight posture, he wore a ceremonial suit of white and gold that accentuated his broad shoulders and the effortless grace of his movements. His blonde hair was neatly combed, a soft strand falling casually across his forehead. His light brown eyes studied the young women with focus, not arrogance, but something gentler, as though he sought to understand rather than merely choose. Beside him stood the king, a man with a steady gaze and serene expression, and the queen, poised and graceful, her delicate smile radiating calm. The master of ceremonies spoke clearly, his voice echoing through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Kingdom of Lumen welcomes you to the beginning of the selection. Among these 23 young women, one shall be chosen to walk beside His Highness, Prince Darian, towards the future of our nation." A murmur swept across the hall. Some girls straightened their backs,
Others exchanged competitive glances. Elara kept her gaze fixed on the prince, her heartbeat quickening. Then Darian stepped forward. His voice, steady yet warm, resonated through the vast chamber. "Welcome to our home. This election is not merely about choosing a future princess, but about finding someone who shares ideals, who understands the responsibility of representing this kingdom, and who is willing to stand beside its people. I hope to know each of you deeply, and perhaps, among you, to find someone with whom I can share not only a throne, but a life." The sincerity in his tone caught Elara off guard. She had expected distance, formality, but there was humanity in those amber eyes. After the speech, the reception began. The young women were divided into small groups to speak briefly with members of the court. Elara found herself among Morella, Alina, and 3 other girls. When Darian approached their circle, everyone straightened instinctively. Morella, nervous, stumbled over her words as she greeted him. Alina, by contrast, gave him a poised, calculated look, her smile perfectly measured, almost challenging. When it was Elara's turn, she offered a small curtsy, just as she had been taught. "It is an honor to meet you, Your Highness," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The honor is mine. Elara, isn't it? A beautiful name. I hope you are comfortable in the palace." "I am enchanted by everything, my lord." His eyes lingered on her a moment longer than expected, as if searching for something beyond her face. Elara felt her cheeks flush under his gaze. As the afternoon went on, the first traces of rivalry began to surface. Some girls approached Elara with genuine kindness, Morella among them, her warmth unmistakable. Others, like Alina and a striking blonde named Celine, carried an air of silent competition. Measured stares, subtly sharpened words. Celine, with her piercing blue eyes and polished charm, had already made her intentions clear. She planned to win this selection. And from the way she looked at Elara, it was evident she had already marked her as a potential threat. Night had fallen over the Palace of Lumen, bringing with it the heavy silences that lurked behind its gilded walls. After hours of forced conversations, calculated laughter, and glances that felt more like veiled judgments, Elara's chest tightened. Every word she spoke seemed rehearsed, every movement scrutinized with unbearable precision. In that place, even breathing seemed to have rules. When the doors of the grand hall finally closed to signal the end of the reception, Elara didn't follow the other girls to their chambers. Instead, she hurried down the corridors, ignoring the glances of guards and servants. The sound of her own footsteps echoed like the impatient heartbeat of something trapped. Finding a side door that opened into the gardens, she slipped outside. The cool night air wrapped around her like an unexpected embrace. The scent of flowers, stronger beneath the moonlight, struck her as painfully beautiful against the suffocating perfection inside. Elara walked toward an ornate fountain where thin streams of water trickled softly, and at last she allowed her tears to fall. "I don't belong here," she whispered, her voice trembling. She thought of Kael, how he used to say her eyes were like the dawn after the rain. She remembered their laughter, the simplicity of evenings spent together, the real steady touch of his hands. Nothing in the palace felt real. Everything was too perfect, too polished. She closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears, but then a male voice broke the silence. "I didn't expect to find anyone out here at this hour." Elara turned sharply. Darian stood just a few paces away, dressed more simply than before, yet still immaculate. The moonlight reflected off his blonde hair, and his light brown eyes carried a look of genuine surprise. I just needed some air," she said quickly, wiping her tears. He took a few steps toward her, but she instinctively stepped back. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone soft. Elara gave a nervous, almost bitter laugh. "Everything's perfectly fine, just like everything here always seems to be, isn't it?" Darian frowned slightly, not understanding at first. "I'm not sure I follow." She burst out. "It's all so suffocating," she said, throwing her hands up. "The rules, the fake smiles, the competition dressed up as grace. I feel like a piece on a board in a game I never asked to play." He stepped closer. "I know it's not easy, but this place can be welcoming, if you just allow—" "Welcoming?" Elara cut him off sharply. "Maybe for you. For us, it's like being on display, examined, measured, compared, as if the only thing that matters is who looks the most perfect for the Golden Prince." Darian blinked, surprised. "Golden Prince?" "Yes," she snapped, her eyes glistening. "You! With your flawless smile, your perfect posture, your carefully crafted speeches. Everything about you feels so calculated, so shallow." A heavy silence fell between them. The wind stirred the trees, making the flowers tremble, as if they too sensed the tension. Darian drew a slow breath, his gaze steady on her. There was no anger in his eyes, but the calm he usually wore had vanished. "I don't know you, Elara." "How could I?" she shot back, her voice breaking. "We're all here to compete for someone who's barely spoken to us. And you just watch from your throne, as if this were some grand performance." For a moment, Darian didn't move. He simply studied her face, the tears, the honesty, the courage it took to speak what no one else dared. Then he stepped back and bowed his head slightly, controlled and quiet. "Perhaps you're right about some of it, but not everything here is as simple as it seems." Ilara's breathing came fast and shallow, as if each word had been torn from her very soul. "I didn't come here to please anyone, Your Highness." He lifted his eyes again, and this time there was something new in them. Not arrogance, not irritation, but a quiet respect. And that is exactly what makes you different. Before she could reply, Darian turned and walked back toward the palace, leaving her alone in the garden. Elara remained there, her heart pounding, feeling both lighter and guiltier than ever. She didn't know whether she had crossed a line, or if, for the first time, she had truly been seen. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the women's quarters, casting golden bands across the marble floor. The palace slowly awakened, wrapped in an elegant silence that masked the constant bustle of servants, guards, and royal advisors. The young women selected for the competition were already growing accustomed to the strict routine, waking before sunrise, dressing flawlessly, and being escorted to the Hall of Roses for their collective breakfast. Elara sat before the full-length mirror as a maid brushed her red hair with delicate, careful strokes. The strands shimmered in the morning light, golden reflections dancing against her pale complexion and bright eyes that, this morning, seemed more tired than usual. A few days, she thought. That's all it took for the unknown to become routine. And yet, nothing there truly felt like hers. Since the night she had argued with the prince in the gardens, something had changed. There had been no official punishment. After all, no one knew the details. But a different kind of silence filled the air whenever Darian entered a room. The glances between them were rare, and when they happened, they were brief, heavy, and filled with something she couldn't quite name. He didn't openly avoid her, but he didn't approach her either. And, as in every palace, rumors spread quickly. While walking through the corridors beside Morella, Elara caught sharp whispers behind her. I heard she cried in the gardens and yelled at him. At the prince? Impossible. Celine saw it. She said they were alone, and Elara came out with red eyes. Elara kept her head high, even as her blood burned beneath her skin. Morella, ever observant, shot her a look of quiet support. Don't mind them, she murmured. They've got nothing better to do than make up stories. They don't have to make them up, Elara replied softly. This time, there's some truth in it. Morella gave her arm a light squeeze, a gesture of friendship. She was one of the few who didn't treat Elara as a threat. Alina, on the other hand, watched everything from afar with that calculating, unreadable expression Elara was beginning to recognize as dangerous.
In the Hall of Roses, the young women sat at long tables of pale wood, adorned with floral arrangements and fine porcelain. Everything there was impeccable, from the way the tea was poured to the arrangement of the cutlery. Elara sat near Morella, trying to ignore the side glances from Celine in the small circle she had already gathered around herself. Elegant, wealthy girls, used to commanding social attention. "I heard the prince will be joining our etiquette training today," one of them said in a melodic voice, full of false sweetness. "Imagine being under his gaze while we learn to walk and speak like proper ladies." Celine laughed softly. "For some, it'll be an opportunity. For others, a disaster." Her blue eyes slid toward Elara with surgical precision, sharp as a blade. Elara kept her posture steady and didn't respond. She had learned in just a few days that in the palace the sharpest battles were fought with smiles. Shortly after breakfast, a servant announced clearly, "Ladies, your presence is requested in the fountain courtyard for the morning presentation." The young women lined up, their flowing dresses in soft pastel tones. The courtyard air was fresh, perfumed by newly watered flowers. At the center stood a small marble dais. When the royal family appeared at the top of the staircase, everyone bowed in respect. Darian emerged just behind his parents, wearing simple yet perfectly tailored attire. His blonde hair was slightly tousled by the wind, and his light brown eyes swept over the group with practiced composure. When his gaze met Elara's, even for a single second, time seemed to narrow. There was no anger, no coldness. There was understanding. They both knew what had happened in the gardens, and they both knew no one else did. The king spoke briefly about the importance of the selection for the kingdom's future, extolling values like honor, unity, and responsibility. Meanwhile, Elara watched Darian from the corner of her eye, trying to see who he really was beneath the facade of the perfect prince. To her surprise, she realized he was watching her too, not with disapproval, but with something resembling restrained curiosity. After the presentation, the young women were dismissed for a short break. Morella pulled Elara aside to a quiet corner of the courtyard, near a fountain. "Did you notice?" she asked, excited. "Notice what?" "He looked at you more than once, and not very subtly." Elara rolled her eyes, trying to suppress the warmth rising to her cheeks. "Morella, he's probably just making sure I don't yell at him in public again." They both laughed, but Elara knew there was more behind those glances. Something had shifted since that night, maybe not in sight, but like a seed planted in the dark. As they returned to the main hall, Alina intercepted them with her elegant posture and razor-sharp gaze. "Elara," she said, her smile controlled, "it must be interesting to be the center of palace gossip." "I'm not the center of anything," Elara replied, forcing calm into her tone. "Oh, but you are." Alina tilted her head slightly. "After all, not every girl has the courage to stand up to a prince." Her tone was neutral, but poison laced her words. Elara didn't reply. She knew that any response could later be used against her. Instead, she smiled politely and walked on, while Morella whispered indignantly beside her. I swear, if looks could kill, she would have dropped me before breakfast. Down the corridors, portraits of past queens silently watched the young women hurrying by. Elara paused before one painting in particular. A beautiful red-haired queen, her gaze intense, dressed in white and gold. For a moment, Elara felt watched, not by the woman in the painting, but by the weight of the history contained within those walls. She was in the middle of a game she didn't yet understand, and whether she liked it or not, she had already become a key piece. The palace of Lumen awoke again with the soft morning light, but Elara felt the weight of several days of routine pressing on her shoulders. Each morning began with the anticipation of more tests, more protocols, more scrutinizing glances. That day's etiquette training would take place in the Hall of Columns, a vast space with marble floors reflecting the sun's rays and tall columns adorned with golden carvings. The young women were organized into a line. A posture instructor, a tall and stern man, walked ahead, observing every detail, the way they held books, the tilt of their chins, the firmness of their steps. You must walk with lightness, but not float. Elegance, not fragility, he instructed, moving down the line of students. Every movement communicates character. Elara focused, trying to control the tension that still lingered after the garden incident. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from contained emotion. Morella offered her an encouraging smile, while Alina passed by with flawless, almost defiant posture. During the training, Celine approached Elara. "Don't worry, there's still time to learn," she said, her smile laced with venom. "Although, of course, some of us were born with this skill." Elara merely gave a sideways smile, choosing not to respond verbally. She had learned that any answer could be used against her. After a few hours of practice, the girls were released for a short break. The cool air of the garden, now bathed in morning sunlight, was a relief. Many of them dispersed into small groups, exchanging whispers and comments. The palace atmosphere felt like a constant game of glances and silent intentions. Elara, exhausted, discreetly walked to one of the smaller fountains near trees that filtered the sunlight. She was about to lose herself in thought when she heard soft footsteps behind her. "I see you prefer the company of silence," said a calm, discreet male voice. She turned quickly, surprised, but did not step back. The prince stood there, dressed simply, yet still impeccable. "And you prefer that everyone knows what you think?" she replied, with a touch of restrained humor. He smiled faintly. "Not always, but sometimes silent observation is more interesting." There was a pause, a comfortable silence that contrasted with the constant evaluative gazes they were used to. Elara took a deep breath, feeling she could be honest, at least partially. "Darian, may I say something?" she finally asked. "Of course." He inclined his head, curious. She hesitated, heart racing, but decided to go on. "I don't expect," she began, carefully choosing her words, "I don't expect this to change anything between us, but I thought that perhaps we could be friends." The prince raised an eyebrow, surprised, but not disapproving. "Friends?" he repeated, as if savoring the word. "Yes." Elara stepped slightly closer, keeping the proper distance. "I've loved before. Someone who isn't here, and I don't want confusion, neither for me nor for you. But maybe we can get to know each other in another way, as friends." Darian remained silent for a moment, contemplating the sincerity in her light eyes.
It wasn't a trivial request. It was the revelation of vulnerability, yet also a demonstration of strength. "Friends," he said, a soft smile forming on his lips, "I believe I can accept that proposal. But I warn you, friendships here are complicated. This place tests everything: character, patience, even patience with silence." Elara laughed softly, feeling the weight of stressful days ease just a little. "I'm ready for the challenge." Darian looked at her for a moment longer, his expression filled with curiosity and respect. "Then we shall start here. But know this, even as friends, I will need to observe you. It is part of my duty." "I would expect no less," she replied, blinking slightly. The sun illuminated Elara's red hair, and the prince seemed to admire the natural glow, though he said nothing. A silent pact was forming, a slow closeness built on sincerity and respect, far from the pressure of competition and palace expectations. When they returned to the hall, the girls were still in small groups, discussing the details of training. Some curious eyes turned toward them, but no one dared to comment. A new bond had been formed, and though subtle, every gesture carried a promise of complicity. Elara felt something different. Not passion, not confusion, but relief and a sense of security she had never known within the palace walls. She knew that the friendship she had proposed could change the way she would live the coming days, easing the weight of the selection and allowing her true self to flourish, even amidst competition and the ever-watchful eyes of everyone around her.
The Palace of Lumen felt more oppressive than ever that morning. The 23 selected moved through the corridors with rehearsed smiles, but the air was thick with silent judgment. Every step Elara took was followed by curious eyes, some filled with disdain. The reason was obvious. She was from Caste 6, the lowest of all, and her presence there unsettled those accustomed to privilege and abundance. "I can't believe they allowed a girl from Caste 6 to participate," Celine whispered to Alina, shooting calculated glances at Elara as she passed. "She has no idea what kind of world this is." Alina merely nodded, wearing that cold smile that always hid her intentions. Some of the other girls, less daring, averted their eyes, unwilling to get caught in the social game unfolding among the more powerful. Elara felt a tightness in her chest. It was hard to ignore the quiet hostility, but she had learned to control her expressions. Every gesture had to convey confidence, even when her heart trembled. She took a deep breath and kept walking, determined not to let prejudice define her. By the afternoon, though, the pressure felt heavier. The girls were invited to another etiquette training, followed by an activity where they had to present their own stories and ambitions. Some compliments were subtle, others dripping with irony. Every time Elara opened her mouth to speak, she felt critical gazes slicing through her like invisible blades. After the activity, she needed to escape. The stillness of the gardens, the whisper of the fountain, the rustle of leaves became her refuge. And as had been happening in recent days, Darian appeared, as if he knew exactly where to find her and what she needed before she even said a word. "You look tired," he said softly, stepping closer. "I am, not from physical exhaustion, but from everything expected of me here." Darian studied her carefully, noticing the tension she couldn't hide. "I know many of the girls look down on you. That must be hard." She sighed, staring at the reflection of the sky on the water. "It is. The truth is, I only accepted coming to the palace for a practical reason. My family has very little, and the monthly allowance I'll receive, it'll help them more than any other opportunity could. I didn't come here chasing dreams of romance or prestige." Her voice was calm, but carried a deep sincerity. Darian stayed quiet for a moment, taking in every word. "I appreciate your honesty," he said at last. "It allows me to see who you really are, not just as a candidate or a beautiful face among many." Elara lifted her gaze and met his light brown eyes, steady, kind. For the first time since she'd arrived, she felt she didn't have to guard herself, that she could be honest without fear of judgment. "It's strange," she murmured with a faint smile, "but here, away from everyone's eyes, I feel like I can finally breathe." Darian smiled in return, a real smile, not formal, but warm and genuine. "Then I promise I'll try to make this place a little more bearable, at least while we're together." A soft warmth spread through Ilara's chest. It wasn't passion, not yet, but a quiet trust, a rare comfort amid the palace's constant tension. "Thank you, truly," she said. They spent some time walking through the gardens, talking about small things, books they liked, memories from childhood, little dreams they'd never shared with anyone. Their friendship deepened silently, built on sincerity and mutual understanding. But not everyone found the peace they did. Some watchful eyes still lingered at a distance, and Celine didn't miss the chance to strike. "How interesting," she said, her tone dripping with sugar and venom, "that even someone from caste 6 can find support when the prince takes an interest." Elara closed her eyes briefly, mastering the anger and discomfort that rose in her chest. She didn't need to react. She had Darian, not as a secret, but as an ally, a friend, and that made Celine's words meaningless. "Ignore her," he said quietly, noticing the tension in her expression. "You say that with such certainty," she replied, with a small but sincere smile forming on her lips. "Because I know who you are, and no one else gets to define you." Ilara's heart quickened, though she kept her composure. Something stirred inside her, a spark of confidence, curiosity, and something she couldn't yet name. She tried to deny it, but the truth was clear. At that moment, with Darian by her side, she didn't feel alone. And that in itself was enough to face any prejudice. As night fell, they slowly returned to the main hall. The palace remained as grand as ever, the whispers of the other selected still floating through the air, but something inside Elara had changed. She walked with her head held high, with the quiet strength of someone who had found a true ally, and the certainty that as long as she had Darian's friendship, she could face whatever came next.
The Hall of Lumen had never looked more magnificent that night. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering reflections over the pale marble floors, while richly embroidered tapestries told stories of kings and queens who had once walked those same walls. The air was filled with floral perfumes, restrained laughter, and the quiet anticipation of all the nobles who had been invited. The 23 selected girls moved through the hall, some confident, others still uncertain, but all fully aware that every gesture, every glance was being observed and judged. Elara entered, her layered pink gown gliding softly over the polished floor. The contrast with her red hair and green eyes was striking. Despite the silent attention she drew, she felt prepared. Every step was measured, every smile carefully composed, yet still genuine. Darian stood at the center of the hall, watching the guests with impeccable posture. When his eyes met Elara's, there was a brief moment of silent recognition, a small, knowing nod that no one else seemed to notice. A faint warmth spread through her chest, but she quickly looked away, trying to maintain her composure. During the first part of the ball, conversations flowed with polite small talk, discreet compliments, and subtle, assessing gazes. Celine,
ever elegant and even more venomous, did not miss the chance to whisper an insult. How interesting that even a girl from caste 6 can try so hard, she murmured to Alina, casting a sideways glance at Elara. She simply drew a deep breath and ignored the comment. She had learned that reacting only gave others power. Instead, she focused on the soft music and on Darian's calm presence across the room, even when he was speaking with others. Every time their eyes met, there was a quiet connection between them, as if they could understand each other without words. Later, when the main dance began, Darian approached her and extended his hand gently. "May I have this dance?" he asked with a discreet smile. Elara accepted, her heartbeat quickening once again. As they moved across the hall, the music seemed to fill the space between them, and the attention of the other girls faded away. Every movement, every step, carried a subtle tension, an unspoken understanding.
"Are you nervous?" Darian asked softly, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "A little," she admitted, smiling faintly. "But you make everything feel easier." And for a moment, nothing else existed but the two of them. However, the charm of the evening shattered with a distant crash, followed by screams and the metallic sound of alarms. The hall descended into chaos. Guards rushed in every direction, and the music stopped abruptly. "Attack!" shouted one of the officers, turning toward the grand entrance. A chill of fear ran down Elara's spine. People screamed, some trying to flee, others frozen in confusion. Darian immediately stepped in front of her, guiding her toward one of the discreet exits that led to the gardens. "Stay calm, Elara," he said, holding her hand firmly but gently. "The guards are here to protect us." "Who are they?" she asked breathlessly, her green eyes scanning the moonlit garden. "The rebels," Darian replied, watching the movement of the guards and the flames beginning to rise near the castle walls. "There are two main factions, the Lunas, strategic, calmer, rarely killing unless necessary, and the Solars, far more aggressive and deadly. Tonight, it seems we're facing the Lunas, but that doesn't mean we're safe." "So they attack for different reasons?" Elara asked, trying to process it all as adrenaline rushed through her. "Exactly," he said, maintaining composure despite the danger. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the kingdom's reality pressing on her. Yet at the same time, something within her stirred, a mix of fear, excitement, and the sudden need for courage. He studied her quietly, recognizing the vulnerability in her expression. They walked through the gardens, away from the chaos, finding a small refuge among trees and flowers. The moonlight fell over their faces, making the moment almost magical, despite the turmoil surrounding the palace. "I feel like I can trust you," Elara said softly, offering a faint smile. "And you can," Darian replied, smiling back. "Trust isn't weakness. It just means you know who's worth it." Elara's heart quickened again, but it wasn't love, not yet. It was something subtler, the quiet awakening of being truly understood and supported, even amid danger and hostility. The distant sounds of chaos still echoed in the night, a reminder that the danger was not over, yet in that silent garden, a genuine bond, built on trust and truth, was quietly forming, laying the foundation for feelings far deeper than either could yet admit. Elara took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air and the warmth of Darian's nearness. Something inside her had changed. It wasn't fear that held her now, nor anxiety. It was a sense of belonging, of safety, even in a world filled with judgment and rebels lurking in the shadows. And that, to her, was worth more than any title, any dance, or any compliment. The distant sounds of chaos reminded them that danger still loomed, but in the moonlit garden, Elara felt something new, a delicate, quiet awakening that made her feel seen and safe for the first time in a long while. She drew another breath, trying to calm the warmth rising in her chest. It wasn't love yet, but it was a connection she couldn't deny, even as her heart remained cautious and guarded. And there, in the silence between trees and flowers, a true friendship took root, one ready to withstand the chaos, the prejudice, and the trials that the Palace of Lumen still had in store.
The Palace of Lumen awoke under a tense silence the morning after the attack. Guards patrolled every corridor with doubled vigilance, while groups of servants cleaned the minor damages as the nobles and the selected still whispered about the previous night's events. The memory of the flames that had licked part of the courtyard and the sudden chaos that followed remained vivid in everyone's mind. Elara walked through the corridors, maintaining the graceful posture she had learned to cultivate, though her heart still raced as she recalled every detail of the attack. Fear mixed with adrenaline and the feeling of vulnerability made each step a silent act of courage. She could still feel Darian's attentive gaze on her, even as he organized the guards and supervised the safety of every guest. "It seems the palace never sleeps in peace," Elara said, approaching Darian in the inner garden where he was reviewing the guards' reports. "Nor should it," he replied, without lifting his eyes from the documents, though a faint smile appeared when he noticed her presence. "The attack showed that even among the Lumen we must remain vigilant. They test our defenses, study our weaknesses." She crossed her arms, suspicion still lingering. "And the Solars?" she asked quietly. "Are they really as dangerous as people say?" Darian sighed, looking at her with a serious expression. "They are. Unlike the Lumen, they do not hesitate. They can strike without warning and with lethal intent. That is why constant vigilance is necessary." She nodded, taking in the information, but she couldn't help noticing how he gave orders to the guards, helped the selected organize themselves, and yet kept a special attention fixed on her. It was a discreet but perceptible kind of care, one that stirred something new inside her, a blend of comfort and a subtle tension she still tried to deny. "Why do you worry about me more than the others?" she asked, her usual honesty showing through. Darian paused, leaning slightly toward her. "It's not that I worry more. I care about all of you," he said seriously. "But there's something about you that makes me want to ensure your safety, even when everything seems calm." Elara looked away, feeling warmth rise to her chest, though she kept her composure. "I still don't trust you blindly," she said. "I've only learned that I can rely on you, to a limited extent." "And that's enough for now," he replied with a gentle smile. "Trust isn't demanded, it's built." The silence between them was comfortable, filled with sincerity and a new kind of energy that neither dared to name. Elara realized that, even while cautious, there was something in his presence that made her feel less alone amidst the palace's constant tension. That afternoon brought another test of social skill and historical knowledge, organized by the Palace Council to assess each selected. Elara faced critical gazes with growing courage. Some of the girls who had once belittled her began to look at her with respect, not just for her elegant composure, but for her ability to remain calm in the face of danger and prejudice. During a short break, Darian approached her, discreetly guiding her to a quiet corner of the garden. "You did very well," he said softly, almost intimately. "It's not just courage, it's presence, Elara." She blushed slightly, but replied firmly, "Presence doesn't protect anyone from rebels or intrigues." She sighed, gazing down at the stone paths. "But thank you." He extended his hand, as if inviting her to walk with him. "I know you're alert, cautious, and hesitant, but know that as long as we're together, I'll do everything I can to make sure you never feel alone."
She hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. "I still can't promise full trust," she admitted, meeting Darian's light brown eyes. "But I can promise attention. That's more than enough," he said sincerely, a faint smile curving his lips. As they walked, the wind carried the distant echo of screams and clashing metal, signs that Lumen rebels were once again testing the castle's defenses, probing for weaknesses. Darian reacted immediately, coordinating the guards, leading the selected to safety, maintaining calm. Yet Elara noticed that even in the chaos, his attention always found its way back to her. "You truly care for everyone," said Elara, almost in awe. "But with me, it feels different." "Because you face every situation with truth, not just with appearances," he replied firmly, his tone steady. "That demands attention. That deserves care." She swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of respect, caution, and something more. A quiet, emotional awakening, still uncertain, yet impossible to ignore. When night finally fell, bringing relative calm, the palace was safe once more, but tension lingered in the air. Darian guided Elara to a higher point in the gardens where they could watch the moon reflected in the fountains and along the stone pathways. "You managed to face everything today," he said, looking at her with a mix of pride and care. "Not just the ball, or the intrigues, or the rebels. You stayed strong." Darian smiled, touching her arm lightly, not intruding, but offering silent reassurance. "That's all I ask for now. Trust is built step by step, and I will be here for as long as you decide to trust me more." Her heart raced. It wasn't love yet, but it was something deep, a connection built on truth, care, and understanding, which neither prejudice nor danger nor the past could erase. She took a deep breath, gazing at the garden paths bathed in moonlight, and realized that even in a world of intrigue and constant threats, there was a safe space forming, slowly, gently, beside someone she could begin to trust, even if just a little. And in that moment, under the soft glow of the moon and the discreet touch of Darian's hand, Elara felt something awaken within her, a new feeling, quiet and delicate, yet impossible to deny, as the palace loomed grand behind them, and the world beyond its walls remained perilous and uncertain. The days following the attack on the Palace of Lumen were intense. Guards patrolled the corridors without rest, and rumors about the rebels spread like wildfire. Elara, though always cautious, began to feel safer amid the rigid routine, but also more closely watched by the other selected. One quiet afternoon, the girls gathered in one of the palace's smaller lounges, far from the prince's and guards' watchful eyes. Seated on delicately upholstered chairs, wearing gowns of varied tones, they whispered and giggled softly, trying to gauge both their rivals and potential allies. "So, Elara," began Celine, arching an eyebrow with that usual air of superiority, "how was your moment with Darian last night? He danced with you, didn't he?" Elara lifted her chin, keeping her composure. "Yes, he did. But that means nothing more than a dance." Alina, always curious and mischievous, let out a little laugh. "Oh, come on, Elara. Everyone knows that a dance with him is special. He's the prince, after all. I bet he's already kissed some of you." A murmur rippled through the group. Some girls blushed, others looked away, and Elara felt a mix of irritation and curiosity. "And what about him?" asked Marielle, the most sensitive of the group. "Has he kissed any of you?" Elara took a deep breath, her honesty surfacing before her defensiveness. "No. At least, not me. And honestly, I don't think that's something we should speculate about." Celine crossed her arms,
unable to hide her restrained jealousy. "You talk as if it were easy, but don't you think he watches everyone closely? I can't believe he hasn't gotten close to anyone." Elara shrugged, her tone firm but not arrogant. "He can get close to people without it meaning anything. Observation isn't intimacy. I paused, thinking about her own words. "I've already learned not to be fooled by appearances." Alina smiled, leaning closer. "So you stand out in a different way. It's not just beauty, it's presence. Does he notice that?" Elara blushed lightly, but the group's attention soon shifted again. "So he hasn't kissed anyone yet," Marielle said quietly. "Do you think he's going to wait until marriage to kiss only his chosen one?"
"That's impossible. He's the prince," Celine said sharply. "Obviously, he's going to enjoy this phase while choosing his ideal candidate. I heard that anyone who refuses the prince is automatically eliminated," another girl added. Elara tensed. Could he really use his position to take advantage of the situation? Was he that kind of man? As the girls kept exchanging impressions, the conversation gradually shifted to politics. The inevitable topic was the rebels, the lunars and solars, their motivations and the constant threat they posed. "I heard," Celine began again, this time with a more serious tone, "that they don't attack just out of violence. They want change, the end of the castes, the end of poverty." "Exactly," Elara said, looking down at her hands. "I can't judge their ideals, only their actions, but it's complicated. Some of their methods are deadly." "And you?" asked Alina, curious. "Do you think they're right?" Elara sighed, her eyes drifting to the palace gardens through the window. "Maybe, but we can't accept that every violent act is justified. We have to think about the innocence, too." The discussion flowed from strategies to ideals and personal experiences. Each girl shared moments with Darian, some sweet, others strategic, always wrapped in curiosity, jealousy, and careful observation. And despite all the chatter, Elara realized her bond with the prince was unique, quiet, delicate, and something no one else truly understood. Later, as night fell, Elara walked alone through the silent garden. The fragrance of flowers and the moonlight reflecting on the fountain created an almost magical atmosphere. Darian was there, discreetly checking the security arrangements, but when he noticed her approach, a soft smile curved his lips. "By the way," Darian said playfully, as if he had seen the scene 1,000 times before, "if you keep walking around like this, I'm going to end up falling in love. Tomorrow morning, I'll order your maids to make you armor so you can walk safely." Elara elbowed him lightly. "Shut up, Darian." "I'm not kidding," he continued, smiling faintly. "You're too beautiful. I don't think I can resist. When you leave here, we'll have to assign guards to follow you around. You wouldn't survive alone, poor thing." "I can't help it," Elara sighed, fanning herself dramatically. "I didn't ask to be born perfect." "Yeah, I guess that can't be helped," Darian replied, with an amused grin. Elara laughed, not realizing he wasn't laughing with her. She gazed at the garden, and out of the corner of her eye, she noticed him watching her closely, his face inches away. When she turned to ask what he was looking at, she froze. Darian was close enough to kiss her. For a heartbeat, she stood still. Then he leaned in and brushed his lips against hers, soft and hesitant. Elara quickly stepped back, startled. Darian did the same, blushing faintly. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice low and embarrassed. "What are you doing?" Elara asked, her heart racing. "I'm sorry," he repeated, avoiding her gaze. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her hand trembling slightly as she touched her lips, confusion flooding through her. "It's just that the way you are, being here with you. I thought maybe your feelings had changed. And I like you. I thought you'd noticed."
He looked at her carefully, searching her face. "Did I do something wrong? You don't seem happy." Elara tried to control her expression, but the moment had left her shaken. Darian looked as vulnerable as she felt. "I'm sorry," he said again, running a hand through his hair. "I've never kissed anyone before. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm sorry, Elara." A warmth rose through her chest. He wanted his first kiss to be with her. He wasn't perfect, but he was sincere, vulnerable, even gentle. She stepped closer, gently touching her forehead to his. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Trying to erase what just happened," he said softly, smiling. "I think we can do better." She lowered her hand and leaned closer, standing beside him. His gaze was steady, filled with quiet emotion. After a few seconds, he tilted his head and kissed her again. The softest, most hesitant kiss, like a whisper turned into touch. Something about his hesitation made Elara feel cherished. Beneath the silence, she could feel how much he adored her. So this was what it felt like to be truly seen. After a few moments, Darian pulled away, smiling shyly. "Better?" Elara only nodded, unable to speak. Her chest swirled with surprise, excitement, and a strange new warmth that felt like the beginning of something deep. "Can I say something?" he asked seriously now. "Of course," she replied. "I'm not stupid enough to think you've forgotten your old love. I know what you two had. And I know you think there are girls here more suitable for me or for this life. I don't want to rush. I don't want to pretend with anyone else. I just want to know if there's a chance." It was a hard question to answer, but Elara heard truth in his voice and realized that, despite everything, there might be space for both of them. "Yes, Darian," she whispered. "There is." Darian gently drew her closer, his hand resting at her waist. Their noses brushed, and he caressed her face tenderly, as if afraid she might shatter. "Yeah," he said softly, smiling. "I guess it can't be helped." The kiss that followed was shy and delicate, but full of meaning. It wasn't complete surrender. It was the quiet awakening of something honest and deep, a promise that would grow with time, patience, and trust. The next morning seemed brighter than usual, even though nothing outside had changed. The sky was the same soft shade of blue, the gardens were still meticulously tended, and the palace bells chimed with their usual punctuality. Yet, for Elara, everything felt different. She woke before her maid's call, her lips still tingling, as if the kiss from the night before had left an invisible mark. Her heart raced just remembering that instant. The hesitant touch, the unexpected warmth, the way the world had seemed to stop for a single fleeting moment. But she decided to keep it to herself. Not even the girls closest to her would hear about what had happened. She didn't yet understand what it meant, and deep down, she wanted to figure it out before the entire palace began weaving stories for her. In the classroom, the candidates gathered with a mix of excitement and tension. The instructors announced the day's schedule with their usual sternness: posture, etiquette, and dance lessons in the morning, followed by a physical training circuit in the inner gardens. The official explanation was preparation and endurance, but everyone knew it was also a test of grace under pressure. The girls whispered among themselves as they practiced balancing books on their heads or tried, unsuccessfully, to maintain elegance through rehearsed dance steps. The conversation quickly shifted to the most popular topic of the week, their encounters with the prince. "I swear he held my hand for more than 5 seconds, and when he looked into my eyes, I almost fainted." "Lucky you," replied Celie, rolling her eyes. "He was so polite with me, it felt like he was talking to a distant aunt." Laughter rippled through the room. Elara listened silently, careful not to react. "Do you think he's already, you know, kissed any of you?" one of the bolder girls whispered, leaning over the table. The group exploded in excited murmurs. Each girl gave her own theory based on looks, gestures, and brief encounters. Elara kept her posture, focusing on the dance movements, though her cheeks flushed involuntarily. "I doubt he's kissed anyone yet," said Marianne confidently. "He's a prince. He's probably waiting for the right moment." Elara forced a small smile, but said nothing. Later, during physical training, they were led to the private gardens, where they had to walk in heavy dresses along a winding path, balance trays while keeping perfect posture, and practice curtsies again and again under the mild morning sun. Their bodies tired, their feet ached, but Elara couldn't shake her thoughts from the night before. Darian. The way he had looked at her, not as a prince looks at a subject, nor as a man playing a role. There had been tenderness, curiosity, something she couldn't name, but that was beginning to stir inside her with unexpected strength. While the girls around her sighed dreamily, imagining a royal future, Elara found herself wondering whether it was truly impossible to feel something for him. Perhaps, just perhaps, the walls she had built so carefully were beginning to crack. But for now, that secret was hers alone. That same afternoon, while Elara rested in the women's hall after the exhausting training, she was surprised by a maid who approached with perfect poise. "Miss Elara, His Highness requests your presence immediately." Her heart quickened. No matter how many times Darian called for her, there was always that sudden rush of warmth, a mix of nervousness and joy that was hard to hide. "Of course," she replied, standing a bit too quickly. The girls around her began whispering, exchanging curious and amused looks. It was no secret that the prince seemed particularly fond of her. Elara hurried through the corridors, her footsteps echoing against the marble and glass. When she saw him waiting in the courtyard, bathed in soft afternoon light, a smile escaped before she could stop it. "Darian!" she exclaimed, throwing herself into his arms in a spontaneous, heartfelt gesture. When she pulled away, she noticed he seemed a little unsettled, as if struggling to restrain something within. There was tenderness in his gaze, a mixture of affection and respect. Elara knew exactly why. On the night of the ball, after their first kiss, she had asked him to take things slowly. She wasn't ready for promises she didn't yet understand. He had agreed, even though she had caught the faint flash of hurt in his eyes. Since then, he had kept his word. The palace felt emptier now. Some of the candidates had left that week. 2 hadn't adapted to the strict routine. Another couldn't bear the homesickness. The atmosphere grew more intimate, more tense, and Elara couldn't ignore that she was among the prince's favorites. "How are you today?" Darian asked, brushing aside a loose strand of her red hair. "Better than ever," she replied with a smile. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in some important meeting?" "The trade counselor fell ill, so the session was postponed. I'm free, and I thought I might kidnap you for a few hours," he said with a mischievous glint in his eye. "What would you like to do?" "Anything. There are still so many places I haven't seen in the palace. The inner gardens, the stables, and that underground cinema everyone talks about." "Then it's settled," he said, offering his arm. A little rest for the mind never hurt anyone. As they walked through the corridors, their conversation flowed easily, about books, childhood memories, funny stories about clumsy servants. Elara laughed genuinely, forgetting for a moment where she was. Then they passed a line of guards standing in perfect formation along a polished stone hallway. The soldiers stepped aside, saluting the prince and his companion with military precision. Everything seemed perfectly normal, until a soft, involuntary sigh broke the silence. Darian and Elara turned at the same time, and there he was, Kai. Elara felt the air leave her lungs. Time folded in on itself. It had been months since she'd last seen him, before the selection, before the palace, before Darian. Kai, her childhood friend, her first quiet love. He looked different, stronger, his posture straight and disciplined. His once unruly black hair was now cropped short in military style. The immaculate royal uniform suited him perfectly, a stark contrast to the worn, simple clothes he used to wear in the streets of Caste 6. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes, alert and intense, were exactly the same. Elara swallowed hard. She couldn't show anything. "Elara?" Darian asked curiously. "Do you know this soldier?" In 1 second, 1,000 memories flashed through her mind. Moonlit talks, unspoken promises, silent goodbyes. But she held her composure with a strength she didn't know she had. "Yes," she said, clearing her throat. "Soldier Kai is from the same town as me." Kai heard her, and he saw her. His gaze lingered just a fraction too long, as if searching for answers she couldn't give. Darian smiled, delighted by the coincidence. "Welcome, Soldier Kai. You must be glad to see someone familiar here at the palace." "Yes, Your Highness," Kai replied, firmly, though his eyes were cold as stone. "Excellent," Darian continued cheerfully. "Since Elara is from your hometown, I think it's only fitting to assign you to her personal guard rotation. She insists on dismissing her maids at night. Someone needs to look after her," he said, casting a teasing look at Elara. Kai nodded, but for a brief moment, his eyes flickered with something she knew all too well: wounded pride. "I'm not surprised, Your Highness." "Well then, have a good day, soldiers," Darian concluded, guiding Elara out of the corridor. She fought with all her strength not to look back. At the cinema, as the lights dimmed and scenes of an old romance played across the screen, Elara could barely focus. Kai's face, stoic, distant, burned in her mind. Should she tell Darian? If she revealed who Kai had been in her life, his reaction could be unpredictable, not just as a prince, but as a man. For the first time since arriving at the palace, Elara realized her past hadn't stayed as far behind as she'd hoped. And now, what would destiny hold for Elara, torn between the sweet safety of Darian's arms and the intense gaze of Kai, who had returned like a shadow from the past? In a palace where every gesture is watched and every choice can alter the course of a nation, her heart may just be the most unpredictable piece of all. Is it truly possible to choose between the past and the future when both are standing right before you?